The obsidian amphitheater hummed with the low buzz of 47 delegations, but 3 of them sat perfectly still. Tevrak Sorvath watched from the gallery, his left hand resting on the rail. He had seen 46 campaigns and 12 species fall. He had never seen 3 elders sit like statues during a vote. High Commander Torvath Kale rose from his seat. His bronze scales caught the light of the crystal chandeliers, and his 4-fingered hands gripped the edge of the podium. He spoke of administrative relocation and standard pacification protocols. His voice was the voice of someone who had never been interrupted. He had used those words before on 17 systems over 306 years of service. He had never lost a campaign. The council chamber stretched in concentric tiers around a central dais. 9,200 years of law had been written into these black stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of recirculated oxygen and the faint metallic tang of the gravity generators that kept the station world stable. 47 species sat in their designated sections, some with fur, some with scales, some with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Most of them looked bored. This was routine. Another minor species, another relocation. The galaxy moved, and they moved with it. Tevrak leaned forward. He was a Tarvani like Kale, but he was not a commander. He was an observer, a historian attached to the punitive fleet. He had watched the council vote 412 times in his long life. He had never seen a count like this. The motion passes, the speaker announced. 412 in favor, 3 opposed. The 3 opposed were not from any major faction. One was Elder Mavrin, the sole remaining member of a species that had long since faded into obscurity. She had not spoken a single word in open session for 3,000 years. Her fingers, gnarled and thin, tapped a slow rhythm on the stone table. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Tevrak did not know what the rhythm meant, but he knew it was not fear. The other 2 were human delegates, 2 quiet figures who had never raised their voices in any debate. They sat with their hands folded, their faces calm. They did not argue, they did not protest. They simply voted no. And when the speaker announced the result, they did not flinch. Tevrak felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen the humans for 300 years. They had always been quiet, compliant, efficient. They paid their dues. They followed the rules. They never made trouble. Everyone assumed they were weak. Everyone assumed they were grateful to be included. Everyone assumed they would accept whatever the council decided. But the 3 who voted no had read something that the other 409 had not read. Tevrak looked at the data slate in his hand. It listed the fleet orders, 847 ships, 42,000 crew. 13 campaigns of conquest compressed into a single deployment. The humans were to be relocated from their 12 fringe systems. The old Earth colonies, the orbital stations, the mining outposts, all of it would be reassigned to Tarvani administration. Resistance would be met with pacification. Standard protocol. Standard protocol. He had seen that phrase before. He had documented its results. He glanced back at Elder Mavrin. Her tapping had stopped. She was looking directly at the human delegates. They met her gaze. Something passed between them. A recognition that Tevrak could not name. He had never seen anything like it in 1,200 years. Then the speaker banged the gavel. The session was adjourned. The 409 rose and filed out, already discussing trade routes and resource allocations. The 3 who voted no remained seated. The humans did not move. Elder Mavrin did not move. They sat in the empty chamber surrounded by 9,200 years of certainty, and they did not speak. Tevrak felt his left hand tremble. He pressed it flat against the rail. He told himself it was the cold, but the amphitheater was not cold. It was something else. I wish I could say that was the last mistake they made. He would later record. It wasn't. Stay close. 3 days earlier, Admiral Alara Kensington sat in her office beneath the ice of Svalbard, staring at a chipped ceramic mug. The room was small, windowless, lined with metal filing cabinets that had not been updated since the last century. The air smelled of old coffee, ozone from the backup generators, and the faint, dry dust of archived paper. Outside, the Norwegian winter pressed down with 70 meters of ice and rock inside. The only warmth came from a single desk lamp and the memory of better days. The mug was pale gray, with faded blue letters that read World's Passable Admiral. It had a hairline crack near the rim, a hairline crack that had been there for 19 years, since her first command. She had never fixed it. She liked the way the tea seeped through the glaze and stained the ceramic a darker shade. It reminded her that things could be imperfect and still work. She had been sitting there for 47 minutes. The tea inside had gone cold. That was the point. On her desk lay a transmission from the Galactic Council, stamped with the seal of the High Commander's office. It had arrived at 0347 hours local time. She had read it twice. The first time, she felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The second time, she felt something else, a strange, almost anticlimactic calm. She had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. The transmission was an ultimatum. It ordered humanity to accept administrative relocation to designated zones within 72 hours. Failure to comply would result in standard pacification procedures carried out by a fleet of 847 ships under the command of High Commander Torvath Kale. The language was precise, bureaucratic, and utterly devoid of emotion. It did not mention that the relocation meant abandoning Earth, Mars, the Belt, and 9 other colonies that had taken 3 centuries to build. It did not mention that pacification was a euphemism for orbital bombardment. It simply stated the terms and demanded a response. Kensington set the transmission aside. She reached into the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a worn manila folder. The folder was labeled Classified Strategic Vulnerability Analysis. Author E. Kensington, age 27. She opened it. The pages inside were yellowed. The ink faded. But she remembered every word. She had written this report when she was a junior analyst in Earth Defense Command, before she had ever commanded a ship. She had spent 2 years combing through the Galactic Council's founding charter, a document so long and convoluted that even the Council's own archivists rarely read it. She had found something buried in Section 7 Alpha. Article 14. Subsection 3. Clause 91. A clause that designated the inhabitants of Sector 7 Alpha Humanity's 12 systems as perpetual witnesses to Council conduct. The clause gave the witnesses the authority to request verification of any Council military action. Verification meant a temporary cessation of all hostilities pending review. It was a legal timeout, a stop button that had never been pressed. She had included her findings in the report, but she had never acted on them. At 27, she was young and cautious. She had filed the report and moved on, but she had always known the clause was there. She had always known that one day someone would need to use it. That day had arrived. She picked up the mug. The cold tea sloshed against the cracked rim. She did not drink it. She set it down and pressed a button on her console. "Wake the Sentinel," she said. "We have verification to perform." The Sentinel was the flagship of Earth Defense Command, a single ship built in secret over the past 30 years, designed to do one thing: broadcast a signal on the Council's oldest diplomatic channel. The channel had been dormant for 3,000 years. The signal would carry the verification request under Section 7 Alpha. It would force the Council to halt everything and listen. Kensington stood up, pulled on her worn leather gloves, the same gloves she had worn for 19 years, and walked to the door. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She did not hurry. There was no point in hurrying. The fleet was already on its way. The clock was already ticking. She made her way through the concrete corridors of the bunker, past the sleeping quarters and the mess hall, past the rows of terminals where officers stared at screens showing the same silent alert. She reached the command center, a wide circular room dominated by a holographic display of the solar system. Captain Drake was already there, running diagnostics on the comm array. Lieutenant Park was at her station, a folded photograph of her grandmother tucked into her breast pocket. "Admiral," Drake said, snapping to attention. "The Sentinel is ready. The channel is open." "How long until the fleet arrives?" Kensington asked. Park answered without looking up from her screen. 12 hours, give or take. They're coming in fast, high burn, no deceleration yet. They don't expect us to do anything. They never do, Kensington said. She walked to the main console and pulled up the text of Section 7 Alpha. She had read it 100 times, but she read it again. The words were dry and legal, but they carried weight. She had verified them 7 years ago when Park first brought them to her attention. Park had been a graduate student then, working on xeno-legal frameworks. She had identified the protocol during her doctoral research. She had brought it to Kensington's office, trembling with excitement. "Admiral," Park had said, "this changes everything. The witness protocol is real. It's been dormant for 3,000 years, but it's real." Kensington had nodded. She had not acted then. She had waited. She had waited for the council to show its hand, and now the council had. "Lieutenant Park," Kensington said, "explain it one more time." "For the record," Park turned. Her voice was steady, but her fingers gripped the edge of her station. Section 7 Alpha designates the inhabitants of Sector 7 Alpha as perpetual witnesses to the conduct of the Galactic Council. The protocol grants us the authority to request verification of any military action taken by the Council against us. The request forces a temporary cessation of all hostilities pending a review by a neutral arbiter. If the Council refuses the request, they violate their own charter. If they comply, they have to stop. And they've never used it before, Drake asked. "No one has ever used it," Park said. "Most council members don't even know it exists." "It was buried in the founding charter, an oversight, probably. A clause drafted by the original architects of the council back when they still believed in accountability. Over time, they forgot about it. The bureaucratic machinery moved on. The clause became obsolete. Or so they thought." Kensington looked at the holographic display. She could see the fleet's approach vector, a dense cluster of red dots converging on Earth's position, 847 ships, 42,000 crew, 13 campaigns of conquest, all of it built on the assumption that might makes right. "The assumption was wrong. We have to broadcast now," Kensington said. "Before they enter weapons range, they need to hear it before they have time to think. They'll ignore it," Drake said. "They'll say it's a trick, that the signal is corrupted, that we're faking the protocol. That's why we need Elder Mavrin," Kensington said. "She was the one who helped me find the clause. 30 years ago, she's been waiting for this moment. She knows the protocol is real. She's the only one who can authenticate it in front of the council." Park looked up. "Admiral, how did you know Elder Mavrin?" "She visited Earth when I was 27. She came to the Svalbard Archive to study human legal traditions. I was assigned as her escort. We spent 3 weeks together. She showed me the clause. She told me that the council had never intended to enforce it, but that it was still binding. She said that one day someone would need to use it. She said that someone would be us." Kensington paused. She picked up the mug that she had brought with her from her office. The tea was still cold. She did not drink it. "I've been waiting 30 years for this day," she said, "and now it's here, so let's not waste any more time. Wake Elder Mavrin. Tell her the verification request is ready. Tell her we need her voice." Park nodded and began typing. The message would take 11 minutes to reach the council chamber, 11 minutes of uncertainty, 11 minutes of silence before the galaxy learned that the quiet ones had not been quiet at all. Kensington looked at the hologram. The red dots were getting closer. She could almost feel the weight of their presence, the bronze arrogance of Kale, the certainty of 409 votes, the blind momentum of 9,200 years of institutional rot. But she also felt the weight of a different kind of certainty, the certainty that a law once written could not be unwritten, the certainty that patience was not submission, the certainty that the galaxy would stop moving, and when it did, it would have no choice but to listen. She set the mug down on the console, the hairline crack faced up. She did not cover it. "Let's find out if the council remembers its own laws," she said. The bridge fell silent. The hum of the generators filled the space. Outside, the stars were cold and distant, and the fleet was still 11 hours away. But the clock was running, and the signal was waiting, and somewhere in the obsidian amphitheater, an old woman with gnarled fingers was tapping a rhythm that no one else understood. Kensington did not look away from the screen. She did not need to. She had already seen the end of this story. She had written it 30 years ago, in a classified folder that no one had read. But she had read it, and she had remembered. The first transmission would go out in 11 minutes. The second transmission, the verification request, would follow immediately after, and then the galaxy would have to choose. They could ignore the law and admit that their institutions were built on convenience. Or they could obey the law and accept that humanity had never been under their authority. Either way, the silence would speak. She reached for the mug. The tea was still cold, cold like the patience that had lasted 300 years. She did not drink it. She just held it, feeling the crack with her thumb. Some things, she knew, were meant to stay cold. "Park," she said, "prepare the broadcast, and make sure it's loud." "Yes, Admiral." The countdown began. Park's fingers flew across the console. The encrypted verification request rolled through the comm array, a burst of ancient code on a frequency older than the Council itself. The transmission would take 11 minutes to reach the obsidian amphitheater, but Kensington knew that Mavrin would feel it long before the signal arrived. The old woman had always been sensitive to the rhythms of the council's machinery. She would know when the clock started. Kensington set the mug down on the console. The crack faced up, as always. She had never been able to decide whether it was a flaw or a feature, but right now, she was grateful for the small, solid weight of it in her hand. It reminded her that some things could survive 19 years of use without breaking completely. "Admiral," Drake said, his voice tight, "the fleet is still decelerating. They'll enter the outer system in 7 hours. They're not slowing enough for a diplomatic approach." "Then they're expecting a fight," Kensington said. "They're wrong." She walked to the tactical display. The hologram showed the solar system in miniature: Earth, Mars, the Belt, Jupiter's mass shadow where 40 capital ships had been waiting for 30 years. The ships were dark, cold, running silent, every system except life support and passive sensors shut down. They had been built in secret, piece by piece, funded through 300 years of quiet trade. Their crews had been rotated in and out without ever seeing the sun. They were humanity's hidden hand, and they had never fired a single shot. Kensington pulled up the deployment order. "Phase 1, she said. "Move the hidden fleet into position behind the Council's approach vector. No weapons lock, no active scanning. They don't need to see us, they just need to know we're there." Drake nodded. "The signal will take 90 seconds to reach them on dark comms. Then we have 90 seconds to decide if we're doing this," Kensington said. She looked at Park. Park's grandmother had taught her to read ancient documents, the kind of documents that had been scanned and forgotten, buried in digital archives that no one checked. Park had spent 7 years looking for the clause. She had found it in an old backup tape from the Council's first century, a tape that had been misfiled and left to rot. She had brought it to Kensington with trembling hands. That was 7 years ago. Now Park stood at her station, her grandmother's photograph in her pocket, and did not tremble at all. "We're doing this," Park said. "We've been waiting for 300 years. We can wait 90 more seconds." Kensington nodded. "Send the order." The 90 seconds crawled. The holographic display flickered, then updated. 40 red dots began to move out from behind Jupiter's mass shadow. They did not accelerate aggressively. They did not lock weapons. They simply appeared, a line of cold, dark holes behind the Council fleet's line of advance. Each ship was a message. We could fight. We choose not to. Kensington watched the dots align. She knew the fleet commanders on those ships, men and women who had trained for decades for a battle they had never fought. They had practiced silent approaches, emergency decels, asymmetric warfare against larger forces. They had never used any of it. They had waited. They had watched, and now they were moving. The 90 seconds ended. The hidden fleet was in position. The Council fleet, 847 ships strong, had not yet noticed. "Now we wait for the signal to reach the Council," Kensington said. "And we wait for Mavrin to answer." She reached for the mug again. The tea was still cold. She did not drink it. Across the galaxy, in the obsidian amphitheater, Elder Mavrin's fingers stopped tapping. She had not moved from her seat since the vote. The chamber was empty except for the cleaning drones and the 2 human delegates, who had also stayed. They sat in silence, their hands folded, their faces calm. Mavrin's eyes were fixed on the empty podium. She had not spoken a word in open session for 3,000 years, not since the Council had voted to expand the Tarvani military authority. She had seen that vote pass by a wide margin. She had watched the Tarvani conquer 17 systems. She had documented every one. She had filed her observations in the archive, in the section marked for the record, a section that no one ever read, but she had read it. And she had kept a copy. Her communicator buzzed softly, a frequency no one else in the amphitheater could detect. It was a signal from Earth, a thread of encrypted data that had traveled through the relays at the speed of light. She knew what it would say. She had been waiting for this message for 30 years, ever since she had met a young analyst named Kensington in a cold bunker beneath the ice. She read the verification request. Her gnarled fingers traced the text. It was exactly what she had expected. Section 7 Alpha, Article 14, Subsection 3. Clause 91, the Perpetual Witness Protocol. Humanity was invoking the clause. They were asking the Council to stop. Mavrin did not smile. She did not weep. She simply nodded once and began to compose her response. She typed 3 words. "The protocol is active." Then she added a line of citation, Section 7 Alpha, Article 14, Subsection 3, Clause 91. She appended her authentication code, a code that had been issued to her species on the Council's founding day. It would be the first transmission she had broadcast in 3,000 years. It would be short. It would be final. A code that had never been revoked. She sent the message. It would reach the Council's comm array in 2 seconds. It would reach every ship in the Council fleet in 8 seconds. It would reach Earth in 11 minutes. But by then, it would be too late for anyone to argue. In the command center on Earth, the seconds ticked past. Kensington had not moved from her position at the holographic display. The hidden fleet was holding steady. The Council fleet was still approaching, still unaware. Park monitored the comm array, waiting for the confirmation that Mavrin had received the signal. "Admiral," Park said, "we have an authentication handshake from the Council relay. It's Mavrin's code." "She's received the request." Kensington allowed herself a single breath. How long until she broadcasts? Unknown. She may need time to compose a response, or she may have already done it. Kensington nodded. She looked at the hologram. The red dots were closer now. The fleet was in the outer system, passing the orbit of Neptune. They were still traveling at high speed, too fast for a diplomatic approach. They were preparing for a tactical insertion, a rapid decel into weapons range. "Captain Drake," she said, "prepare the Sentinel for broadcast. We'll transmit the verification request on the Council's oldest diplomatic channel. Make sure the signal is clean. They need to hear it." "Yes, Admiral." Drake moved to the comm station. The Sentinel was not a warship in the traditional sense. It was a signal platform built around a single transmitter that could punch through jamming and interference across half the galaxy. It had taken 30 years to build, funded by 300 years of quiet trade. Its power core could run a small city. Its antenna array was larger than the ship itself. It had never been tested at full strength. "Powering up the transmitter," Drake announced. "We'll be ready in 4 minutes." Kensington turned to Park. "Any sign of a response from Mavrin?" Park shook her head. "Nothing on the open channels, but she may be waiting for us to broadcast first. She may want to see our request before she speaks. Then we broadcast," Kensington said. "We start the clock, and then we wait." The 4 minutes stretched. Kensington picked up the mug again, feeling the crack with her thumb. She thought about the 300 years of waiting, the generations of humans who had lived and died under the Council's distant, indifferent authority. They had mined asteroids, built stations, raised children, died of old age, all while the Council assumed they were weak. They had never fought. They had never resisted. They had just waited, and now the waiting was over. "Transmitter ready," Drake said. "Channel open." "Broadcast in 5 seconds." Kensington set the mug down. "Do it." The signal left the Sentinel at the speed of light. It carried the verification request, the citation of Section 7 Alpha, and the human delegate's authentication. It was a legal document, dry and bureaucratic, but it was also a bomb. It would land in the Council's comm array, and from there it would ripple through every ship in the fleet, every official in the chamber, every record in the archive. Kensington watched the signal trajectory on the display. It would take 11 minutes to reach the Council. The fleet would reach weapons range in 3 hours. The timing was tight, but it was always going to be tight. "We've transmitted," she said. "Now we wait." She turned to the bridge crew. Their faces were pale, but steady. They had trained for this moment. They had trained for years. Now they would see if the training had been worth it. Lieutenant Park, monitor for any response from the Council. "Captain Drake, keep the Sentinel's comm array open. I'll be in my study if you need me." She walked to the door, still holding the mug. She did not know why she was keeping it with her. It was just a mug, chipped and cold. But she had held it for 47 minutes before the transmission, and she had held it through the broadcast. It felt like a talisman. It felt like the only thing that was real. She sat down in her office, in the same chair, under the same desk lamp. The classified folder was still open on her desk. She read the last page of her 30-year-old report. The witness protocol is the only check on Council power. It has never been invoked. If it is ever invoked, the Council will be forced to choose between admitting its own institutions are illegitimate or destroying its own charter. Neither option is easy. Both are possible. She had written those words at 27. She had not known then that she would be the one to invoke it. She had not known then that she would spend 30 years waiting for this day, but she had known that it would come. She set the mug down on the desk. The tea was still cold. It had been cold for 300 years, if you counted the waiting. She did not drink it. Across the void, the Council fleet had reached the edge of the human system. High Commander Torvath Kale stood on the bridge of his flagship, his bronze scales catching the glow of the tactical display. He had 847 ships under his command. He had 42,000 crew. He had conquered 17 systems. He had never lost a campaign. He expected to see panic. He expected to see civilian shuttles fleeing, defense platforms scrambling, the desperate scramble of a species that had just realized its weakness. Instead, he saw nothing. The human system was quiet. No warships in orbit, no defensive formations, no emergency broadcasts. Just the planets, the moons, the asteroid belts, and one single ship, floating silently at the edge of the inner system. "What is that?" Kale asked. His tactical officer squinted at the display. "It's a human vessel, High Commander. Designation UES Sentinel. It's broadcasting a signal on the Council's oldest diplomatic channel. We're receiving it now." Kale frowned. "Translate it." The officer paused. "High Commander, it's a verification request under Section 7 Alpha of the Council's founding charter. It cites Article 14, Subsection 3, Clause 91, the Perpetual Witness Protocol." Kale's eyes narrowed. "That's not a real thing. The authentication checks out, High Commander. It's the same authentication code as the human delegation's official seal. And there's an appended message from Council Elder Mavrin. It says the protocol is active." Kale stood motionless for a long moment. His 306 years of certainty did not prepare him for this. He had never heard of the Perpetual Witness Protocol. He had never been told that any species had the authority to question his orders. He had assumed that the Council's law was whatever the Council said it was. He had assumed that might made right. He was wrong. "Send a fleet-wide order," he said. "Hold position. I want to confirm this." The order went out. The fleet slowed its advance. 847 ships, 42,000 crew, all of them waiting for clarification. But there was no clarification. There was only the signal from the Sentinel, repeating its request, and the silence of a species that had been watching for 300 years. Kale looked at the single ship on his display. It was small. It was unarmed. It was floating at the edge of the system, as if it had all the time in the galaxy. And it did. "Admiral," he said to his comms officer, "patch me through to the Sentinel. I want to speak to whoever is in command." The signal traveled across the void. On the other end, Admiral Alara Kensington waited. In her study, the mug sat on the desk. The crack faced up. The tea was cold. But she was not cold. She was ready. The countdown had begun. The comm channel opened with a static hiss. Admiral Kensington heard the voice before she saw the face. Deep, resonant, the voice of a predator who had never been questioned. High Commander Torvath Kale did not introduce himself. He did not offer pleasantries. He simply spoke. "Human Commander. This is High Commander Kale of the Tarvani Punitive Fleet. You have transmitted a signal that my tactical officers cannot authenticate. I am giving you one opportunity to explain before I order my fleet to resume its advance." Kensington did not flinch. She had been waiting for this voice for 30 years. She had imagined it 1,000 times, the arrogance, the certainty, the assumption that she would fold. She had prepared for this moment. She leaned forward, her gloved hands resting on the console. The mug was beside her, cold and steady. She did not touch it. "High Commander Kale," she said, her voice calm, measured, precise. "I am Admiral Alara Kensington of Earth Defense Command. The signal you received is a verification request under Section 7 Alpha of the Galactic Council's founding charter. It has been authenticated by your own Council's relay systems. I'm not explaining anything. I'm informing you that your fleet is legally obligated to halt all military action pending a review. If you advance, you will be violating the Council's own law." On the other side of the void, Kale's bronze scales rippled. He had conquered 17 systems. He had never been spoken to this way. His claws extended and retracted, a reflexive gesture of irritation. But he did not interrupt. "Admiral," he said, "I have served the Council for 306 years. I have commanded 847 ships. I have never heard of this protocol you are citing." "It does not exist." "It exists," Kensington said. "Article 14, Subsection 3, Clause 91, the Perpetual Witness Protocol. It was written into the founding charter 3,000 years before you were born." It designates the inhabitants of Sector 7 Alpha Humanity's 12 systems as perpetual witnesses to Council conduct. The protocol gives us the authority to request verification of any military action. Your own Elder Mavrin has authenticated it. Her message is appended to our transmission. Kale was silent. His bridge crew waited. The tactical display showed the Sentinel floating at the edge of the system, small and vulnerable, but also, somehow, immovable. It had not fled. It had not fired. It had simply stated a fact. Elder Mavrin, Kale said slowly, has not spoken in 3,000 years. She does not have the authority to authenticate anything. She has the authority of the founding charter, Kensington said. And she has the authority of 3,000 years of silence. She has been watching. We have all been watching. You have conquered 17 systems. You have relocated 41 species. You have never been questioned. But the law does not forget, High Commander. It simply waits for someone to read it. Kale's voice hardened. You are bluffing. You are a minor species on the fringe of the galaxy. You have no power. You have no authority. You have no ships that can match mine. I could destroy your planet in a matter of hours. Kensington allowed a small pause. Then she spoke, her voice soft but carrying all the weight of 300 years of waiting. High Commander, look at your tactical display again. Look behind your fleet. You will see 40 ships that you did not detect, positioned exactly behind your approach vector. They have been there for 30 years. They are not locked on. They are not threatening you. They are simply confirming my point. We could have fought. We chose not to. We chose to wait. Kale's eyes flicked to his tactical officer. The officer's face was pale. High Commander, there are contacts. 40 ships. They appeared in the last 30 seconds. They are running silent. No active sensors. No weapons lock. They are just there. Kale's claws extended fully. He had been outflanked. He had been outmaneuvered. And he had not even noticed. Admiral, he said, his voice low, you have made a point, but the point is irrelevant. The Council will not allow a minor species to dictate military policy. Elder Mavrin's authentication will be overruled. The protocol will be amended. You are stalling, nothing more. We are not stalling, Kensington said. We are verifying, and while we verify, you cannot move. If you move, you admit that the law is meaningless. You admit that your entire institution is built on convenience, not justice. That is the choice before you, High Commander. You can obey the law, or you can destroy it. But if you destroy it, you destroy everything you have ever conquered. Kale did not respond. The comm channel stayed open, but he was no longer speaking. He was thinking a rare thing, for a creature of 306 years of certainty. Kensington waited. She did not blink. She did not look away. She picked up the mug. The tea was still cold. She did not drink it. She just held it. The silence stretched. On the bridge of the Tarvani flagship, Kale's crew waited for orders. The 847 ships behind them waited for orders. The 42,000 crew members waited for orders, but the orders did not come. Kale was frozen, not by fear, but by something he had never felt, doubt. He had never doubted before. He had never needed to. He had been right, always right, because power had always been on his side. But now, for the first time in 36 years, he was not sure that power was enough. The law was a weapon he could not wield. The law was a wall he could not breach. The law was a mirror that showed him exactly what he was. He looked at the 40 human ships on his display. They were not firing. They were not threatening. They were just there, a reminder that someone had been paying attention. Status of Elder Mavrin's authentication, he said. Confirm it. The tactical officer checked the data. It's confirmed, High Commander. The authentication code matches the Council's founding records. It's the same code that was issued to her species on the founding day. It has never been revoked. Kale's claws retracted. He stood motionless for a long moment. Then he turned to his comms officer. Broadcast fleet-wide, he said. Hold position. I need to think. The fleet held position. 847 ships, 42,000 crew, all of them waiting for a decision that no one had prepared for. Across the void, Tevrik Sorveth watched the exchange from his observation post on a council relay station. He was not supposed to be there. He was supposed to be with the fleet, documenting the campaign. But he had requested a transfer to the relay station 24 hours before the fleet arrived. He had told his superiors that he wanted to observe the diplomatic phase. In truth, he wanted to see what happened when the Council's machinery of conquest encountered something it could not process. He had seen the signal from the Sentinel. He had seen the hidden fleet appear. He had seen Cale's hesitation. And now, for the first time in 1,200 years, he felt something he had never felt before. Hope. Not hope for the Council. The Council was too far gone for hope, but hope for the species that had been watching, waiting, documenting every wrong. They were not weak. They were never weak. They were the ones who had read the charter. Tevrak's left hand trembled. He pressed it flat against the console. He was recording everything, the signal, the response, the silence. He would file it in the archive. He would write it into the history. He looked at his data slate. The verification request was still pending. The fleet was still holding. The countdown was still running. And in the Obsidian Amphitheater, Elder Mavrin was still waiting. On Earth, in the command center, Admiral Kensington was also waiting. She had not moved from her position. The mug was still in her hand. The tea was still cold. She had been waiting for 300 years. She could wait a few more minutes. "Status on the fleet?" she asked. Park answered without looking up. "Holding position, Admiral. No movement." "They're waiting for orders." "Cale is hesitating," Drake said. "That's not what I expected. I thought he would just ignore us." "He can't ignore us," Kensington said. "He can't ignore the law. He's been trying to conquer the galaxy with brute force, but he's never had to face a legal challenge. He doesn't know how to fight that." She set the mug down, the crack faced up. She traced it with her thumb, feeling the rough edge of the ceramic. She had been tracing that crack for 19 years. It was the same crack, the same mug, the same waiting. "Admiral," Park said, "I'm detecting a fleet-wide broadcast from the Council flagship. It's Cale, but he's not addressing us." "He's addressing his own fleet," translated. Park paused. "He's telling them that they are under no obligation to comply with the verification request. He's arguing that the protocol is outdated, that the Council has evolved beyond its founding charter, that Elder Mavrin's authentication is a trick." Kensington's jaw tightened. "He's trying to undermine the protocol before it takes hold. He's trying to make his captains believe that the law is optional." "Will it work?" Drake asked. Kensington shook her head. "It might, but only if they've never read the charter, only if they believe that the law is whatever the powerful say it is." She looked at the holographic display. The 847 ships were still holding position, but she could feel the tension radiating from them, the pressure of 306 years of certainty pressed against the weight of 3,000 years of forgotten law. Something was about to break. She picked up the mug again. She did not drink the tea. She just held it, steady and cold. And then, in the Obsidian Amphitheater, Elder Mavrin began to speak. Her voice was thin, reedy, barely above a whisper, but it carried. It carried because the Council's comm system was still set to her authentication code. It carried because she had not spoken in 3,000 years. It carried because every species in the chamber, every official, every bureaucrat, every observer, stopped what they were doing to listen. "The witness protocol is active," she said. "You cannot fire. You have never had the right to fire." She paused. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then she continued, "I am Elder Mavrin, last of my species. I have been here since the founding. I have watched the Council grow, expand, conquer. I have documented every action. I have filed every report. No one ever read them. That is not my fault. It is yours." She looked directly at the empty podium where the speaker had stood. "The perpetual witnesses are not a threat to the Council. They are a check on the Council. They are a reminder that the law does not belong to the powerful. It belongs to everyone who ever signed the charter, and the charter is still binding." She raised her gnarled hand. Her fingers traced the air as if she were writing something invisible. "High Commander Cale, you are ordered to halt your fleet. You are ordered to comply with the verification request. If you do not, you will be in violation of the founding charter. And if you violate the charter, you destroy the institution that gave you your authority. The Council will fall, and you will be the one who brought it down." She lowered her hand. She did not speak again. She did not need to. The signal rippled through the fleet. Every captain heard her words. Every crew member heard her words. And in the silence that followed, the weight of 3,000 years of law pressed down on them. Cale listened. He listened to the silence. He listened to the absence of orders. He listened to the doubt that had taken root in his own mind. For the first time in 306 years, he did not know what to do. He looked at the tactical display again. The 40 human ships were still there. The Sentinel was still there. The verification request was still waiting. And in the Obsidian Amphitheater, Elder Maverin's authentication code was still active. Kale's claws extended. He turned to his comms officer. "Send a message to the council chamber. I want confirmation that Elder Maverin's broadcast was recorded. I want confirmation that the speaker has acknowledged it." The message went out. The response came back in seconds. "The speaker has acknowledged the broadcast," the comms officer said. "He has ordered a full review of the witness protocol. He has also ordered all fleet movements to cease pending the review." Kale's claws retracted. The order had come from the council itself, not from the humans. The council had acknowledged the law. The council had stopped. The fleet stopped. Every captain, every crew member, every ship, they all stopped. The galaxy stopped moving. On Earth, Admiral Kensington watched the tactical display. The red dots had stopped advancing. They were holding position at the edge of the system. They were waiting for the review. They were waiting for the law. Kensington set the mug down. She did not smile. She did not cheer. She simply nodded once. "Park," she said. "Confirm with the council that the verification request is being processed. Tell them we are ready to provide any documentation they need." "Yes, Admiral." Kensington picked up the mug again. The tea was still cold. It had been cold for 300 years if you counted the waiting. But the waiting was over. She did not drink it. She just held it, feeling the crack. And in the council chamber, Tevrak Sorvath recorded his testimony. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "The fleet stopped," he said. "Not because they were afraid, not because they were outgunned. They stopped because the law was real. And the law was real because someone had read it." The galaxy had nothing to say, and in the silence, Elder Maverin tapped her fingers on the stone table. Tap, pause, tap, pause. It was the same rhythm, but now the meaning was different. It was the rhythm of change. The rhythm stopped. 3 days after the fleet halted, the council convened. High Commander Torvath Kale stood before the podium, his bronze scales dull, his claws retracted. He had been summoned. He had never been summoned before. "The Perpetual Witness Protocol is valid and binding," the speaker announced. "All military actions against Sector 7 Alpha are suspended. The verification request is accepted." Kale's voice cut through the silence. "And my fleet? My 847 ships? My 42,000 crew? Are we to be dismissed by a forgotten clause?" The speaker's answer was cold. "You are not dismissed. You are reminded that the law applies to all. You will not fire. You will not advance. You will wait." Kale turned and walked out. His ceremonial plate, scarred from 13 conquests, caught the light. The scars looked different now. They looked like evidence. On Earth, Admiral Kensington read the transmission. She set the data slate down and picked up her mug. The tea was cold, cold like 300 years of waiting. She drank it anyway. She walked to the command center. "The council has accepted. The fleet is stopped." Lieutenant Park nodded. "It's quiet out there. Really quiet." Kensington looked at the display. The enemy ships held position, no longer a threat. "Park, you found the clause. You brought it to me. That changed everything." Park touched the photograph in her pocket. "I just thought we should know it was there." "That's all anyone ever needed," Kensington said. "Just know it." She returned to her study. The mug sat on the desk. She picked it up, traced the crack with her thumb. She set it down gently. Some things are meant to stay cold. She did not look back. In the council chamber, Elder Maverin remained in her seat, her fingers still. The rhythm that had marked her silence was gone. She felt peace. She rose and walked out, leaving the cleaning drones to the empty chamber. 3 days later, Tevrak Sorvath filed his final testimony. His hands no longer trembled. On the 9,201st year of the Council's founding, the galaxy stopped moving. Not because of weapons. Not because of fear. Because the law was real, and because someone had read it. He looked at the stars. The fleet was still there. Not a threat, a reminder. The quiet was the only truth that remained, he whispered. And the galaxy, for the first time in 9,200 years, had nothing to say. Somewhere beneath the ice of Earth, a chipped ceramic mug sat on a desk, its tea cold, its crack facing up, waiting for nothing. The waiting was over.